Good morning, sunshines. It's good to be here, isn't it? Man, before we get started on our conversation today about how basically we're screwing everything up with emojis, which it's going to make so much sense in a second here, you guys. Uh, I was on TikTok this morning because sometimes that's what I do. They get me. TikTok, it just gets me. It sends me the right stuff. And a video that I had produced about a year ago about Witten John's, I think it was like a maybe rotavirus that he had. It just like it brought me back to this moment of such gratitude to be able to wake up today with a healthy child, not just a child who's not undergoing chemo, not in and out of the hospital and has rang the bell, but like a healthy child who's not losing his guts all over our house. Have any of you guys experienced some of these viruses? I don't know. Like his stomach was blown up. It looked like a basketball, and the house smelled like the back end of a cow for a good 2 or 3 weeks. Horrible. Anyways, I mean, just reflecting upon that, I'm like, gratitude, opportunity. Sometimes, in order to find our gratitude, we compare our lives and our situations with people who are going through things that are more challenging. And sometimes that's your previous self. That's what it is for today. Okay, guys, let me talk about emojis. It's not an emoji. That's what you call it, right? Remember when we said emoticons? No, that's wrong. Emojis, and how maybe it's starting to screw things up. Okay, first question for you. Are you an emoji user? Yes or no? I am not only an emoji user, I am an exclamation point abuser. Absolutely. If I'm going to send you a message, you can be sure that there will be at least 7 exclamation points throughout the message. And there's probably going to be 6 emojis, even if it's just like, hey, honey, there's a salad for dinner. It's going to be like, hey, honey, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, B, right? I made dinner, or I made whatever I just said for dinner, exclamation mark, love, kissy face, happy face, yay, these hands. That's how I communicate. And it's funny because which one are you? Are you emojis? Yes or no? Because I'm an over emoji user, what happens is I create this, like, I feel like I can show my personality and my what I'm internally feeling when I send messages, since we don't voice very much anymore, right? Everything's online, comments, text. And then when I get a message back that says thanks, not like a capital T, no exclamation points. Where's the praise hands? Where's the hearts, right? I'm just like, thanks. And I'm like, what? Well, okay. Are you mad? Are you upset with me? What's going on? Are you mad at me? Has anybody else done this? I think you probably have. Okay. Point of the conversation is the way that you read a message, really anything, but I think it applies in our world very much so in text messages or on your comment feed, is you generally perceive the message in the state that you are personally emotionally in. Let me explain that. Let's say you're having a really shitty day, right? Everything is going wrong. And you just spilled an entire pot of spaghetti on the floor and you're just aggravated, right? And you open up a message that just says, I need to borrow the lawnmower. I don't even know where I make this stuff up, right? And instead of like, for some reason, like they just wanted to borrow the lawnmower and you're in an upset like state of mind. You're like, oh, is it because I borrowed it and I didn't give it back and now you're mad at me? And you start to create this story. So a lot of us, without clear communication, especially when it comes to written message, we create a story about what we think it actually means when we have no freaking clue, because we're not like talking to them with our voices where we can ask questions and bounce back ideas. Instead, you see a message and you assume that they're in a certain state, and it can create quite a bit of problems. So I'm going to give you an example of why this came up for me yesterday, or today. So I did a video, and I'll go through my comment section occasionally, depending, like if I'm getting a bunch of them on there. And sometimes I see things, and I read a comment yesterday where I thought someone was coming at me with a knife, right? Where it was like, yeah, like, right, like an attack on me. And I made 3 or 4 different response videos. And at first I was like showing up pretty snotty. I was just like, okay, like, and I have to remember personally to check myself. Right. And I wasn't even thinking about their message being anything, but I was just thinking about the fact that my mission and my goal is to send light and love to everyone, regardless of how they're showing up to me. Love your enemies. And so that's the state that I was in. I was like, okay, redo the video, Cal. Like, what's the point? You want to try to share some information that you have. You want to try to share a situation. So I redid everything. I feel like it was like pretty wrapped up well. And afterwards, the person that I was replying to shot me a message. And they're like, hey, I think you might have misunderstood. I was actually really supporting you because I've been watching your journey. And they were being sarcastic about saying how I didn't know anything or that I was new to this completely. Right. So I took in a different tone, and I do this. I'm pretty good at misreading things, especially on social media, because there is so much criticism in the comments. So I can kind of veer that direction right away. And I misread. I'm so thankful that I didn't rapid fire with some like accusatory, more like showing up with a lack of love, but I almost did. And even when I went back and watched it, I'm like, I want to just tell you, like, I feel like I'm a little bit sarcastic and that might come off nasty, but I was really trying to educate. And I appreciate your comments because it gave me an opportunity to further educate people on, what we have going on and advocate for my son's disease. So everything was great, but it got me to thinking how this can cause problems in our everyday life. Maybe there's a friend that you text with occasionally, and you feel like something's going on between you, right? You've created a story where you're like things are just like a little bit different between us. And then they send a message, and automatically you assume that that message is being sent from a space of distance instead of from a space of love, especially if they don't use your emoji. If they don't speak in your emoji, I have one friend, she does not use any emojis. And I, like, me being an over emoji user and her being that, I have to check myself and remind myself, hey, you know what? They're actually coming from their space of light and love. If I think something's going on, if I think that they're upset, pick up the phone and call, right? Do a voice message, because I'm just making that up. And that brings me to another side of this conversation. So, number one, I just want encourage you to acknowledge if you're reading things into a message, if you're reading things into comments, if you're reading things into text, if you're reading things into lack of text, right? They never message me. I'm always the one that reaches out. I took a personal development forum a few years ago, and we heard this a lot where people were just like, um, they felt like there was some invisible contract between them and others where it needed to be in every other time you text or you call or whatever, and they would be upset and assume that it means that that person didn't love them as much if they weren't communicating the same. It came up a lot, right? And then the instruction to us was to take ownership of our relationships and our conversations and how we feel. And if we are upset, to have that conversation and say what our expectations are. And then on the other side, understand that they are who they are. And if they're not good texters, that's not something they like to do. If they're not great at being on hour-long conversations, then that's just who they are. Are you going to love them or are you not? Because that's who they are. You can't change them. Don't tell them to change their ways. They're not you, right? Anyways, that was a side tangent. So with this, what are you reading into things? Do you do this? Do you, when you're having a bad day, do you assume the other person is, spitting fire at you? I've had a lot of people actually over the last decade come to me with like, oh, listen to what this person said. And they'll read through a message. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. So that means they like my take on what the message was is completely different. I'm like, oh yeah, that means that they're probably like super excited about this, this, and this. And they're like, no, obviously she's totally pissed at me and she doesn't want to be my friend anymore. I'm like, well, where did you get that? What world are you living in? And on the same side, what world am I living in where all of a sudden it's like the total opposite? So text messages, written word can be challenging if you are making up anything other than what the message says. Now, if somebody puts like angry face on there, yeah, maybe they're angry about the situation. Could be. That makes sense, right? But and then when they have like 14 happy faces, they're not. There's no sarcasm. They're actually happy. And so that's why I overuse emojis, because I want to make sure that people aren't reading in whatever's going on in their heart of the message. Okay, so That's the first piece, right? Are you doing this? Are you reading into it? Second piece is communication between humans, right? In order to really know what's going on, we have a responsibility of telling someone what's going on if we want them to know about it. What I mean by that is if you're upset with someone or a situation and you're just like playing the either sarcasm game where you keep saying things and taking little jabs, or you're just getting quieter and quieter and you want to resolve whatever this issue is. If you want resolve, then it is your job to tell the other person how you feel. You know what, it makes me feel kind of sad when you don't answer any of my text messages. My daughter called me out on this one. She's like, Mom, go through your text feed. She's like, you see how I have 10 and then you have one, and then I have 10 and then you have one. I'm like, yeah. And she's like, it just makes me feel like a little bit unwanted, or like you don't care so much. I'm like, okay, clear. I see that. I'm like, but don't I call you every single time? She's like, no. So like she got to vocalize that with me so that I understood, and I can decide, is this something that I want to change? Is that, relationship worth changing? Absolutely. And it was her confronting me, and people are afraid of confrontation. Anybody else? Confrontate? No, thank you. I would rather just speak in my weird emoji world and make up stories than have confrontation and consideration of one another's actual feelings and see what we have going on here. What if there is something going on here? What if our friendship is not what it used to be? That happens. Life happens. Different chapters happen. You're not meant to be with all of the same humans for your entire life. That would mean we're not growing, right? That would mean we're not progressing. So it's okay to come together to see if you resolve or not. And on the other side of it, it's also our responsibility not to make up shit about what the other person's thinking. It's their job to tell us if they have something going on. If they're upset, they need to tell us. Don't assume that they're upset by the way that they wrote the message, like I did the other day, right? Don't assume that they're mad by the tone, quote unquote, of the response that you got or the comment that you got, because you don't know, that it might just be a reflection of them having a really hard day, or they might have had a completely different tone and you were just reading into it. If they have something going on where they need to bring it to your attention, that's up to them to bring it to your attention. And when you start, like, this is hard, right? Because if we're not both agreeing to those terms in communication, then you can be like me. I'm always going to assume that everybody's just like happy go lucky, everything's good, unless you come over and you tell me, "Hey, we have something going on. I don't know if you've noticed." I'd be like, "Ooh, we do?" I'm going to assume, I know, assuming, asked out of you and me. I'm going to assume that things they are good. They've been going as they have, unless you bring something else to my attention. And if the other person's not on board that I'm communicating with, then, you know, distance can occur. They can keep getting more and more and more angry. And I have no idea that they're angry because they're not communicating about it. So this is a challenging conversation that we're having right now, because it's not like you can like meet someone, like, right? You meet them at the park. You're like, man, it's super cool. We should go hang out sometime. Like, let's play with the kids later on. By the way, though, my expectation of communication is that when I reach out, that's, we are who we are and we're not who we're not. And that's perfect. And also, if you're upset about anything, make sure you let me know, because I'm going to always assume that things are good unless you bring the attention that it's not good. That's weird. That's weird, right? So we're probably not going to do that. But if each one of us starts to practice at least what we can on our sides, which is everything's fine unless you have something to actually bring up, and then it's our responsibility to be the one to bring it up. It will improve communication over time. And if you talk about maybe this, or you share this with one of your people in your tribe, like, you remember how we were like all pissed about, each other not messaging each other at the same time. Here's a conversation about it. As you start to create a tribe that understands that, you can set up those expectations where now you just let go of the ishy feeling of how are they feeling? What did they mean by that message? What was the real tone? Because you know that it is what it is. And also, I mean, you could always use more emojis. That's what I do. It drives me nuts when I'm on my computer writing a message and I can't just pull up the emoji board like really quick like I can on my phone. It drives me crazy. Anywho, you guys, emoji user or not, we love you, right? And I hope that this conversation walks with you throughout the next day, maybe the next week, maybe the next month, or maybe your lifetime, where you decide you're going to stop reading into other people's messages. And if you find yourself doing it, reach out and just ask them the question. Are you upset with me? I think maybe I'm making some stuff on my end up. Like, is anything going on between us? Are we good? Are we clear? Just ask the question and then speak up. If you have something to say it, right? It's not, the confrontation is not the worst thing in the world. You could get through some really big things and stop wasting so much time worrying about what the other person is doing or thinking if you just talked about it and decided, does this still work for us or not? Okay, good morning, sunshines. That is the conversation for today. I love you guys. I am just so thankful not to be surrounded by a house full of caca smell right now. And if you're enjoying that same pure bliss of life where you do not have an infant with rotavirus, high five. Life is good, isn't it? We might have some other things going on, but at least our house doesn't smell like shit. And if yours does, I'm sorry. I do. I feel you. I feel you on a deep level. Maybe shoot me a message and I'll send you a candle or some oils for your diffuser. Because what do you do, right? Perspective reveals miracles, reminding you of that on a continual basis. I am Callie Carroll, and I appreciate getting to chat with you guys. If this supports you in any way, make sure you go ahead and share it to your frenzies or your foes. That's weird, but maybe you want to. I don't know. And I am sending light and love from my heart to yours. I hope you have the most extraordinary day. Bye, guys.